Good day, everyone, and welcome to our talk about open source visibility and how it can help you to bridge the gap between dev and SecOps. I'm happy to be joined by Geva Solomonovich, who is the CTO of Snyk. Good afternoon, Geva.
Hi, Wendy. Nice to be here with you, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
Excellent. And I'm Wendy Moore from Trend Micro, where I'm the VP of Product Marketing. So today we really want to look at the challenge of open source visibility as it relates to two groups, dev and SecOps. So we all know that there is an explosion when it comes to the usage of open source in coding. You see lots of stats out there, but a recent report from Snyk found that over 80% of applications out there actually utilize open source. And the thing that comes along with that is there is some potential risk with that. And that is reflected in the fact that over the last 3 years, the number of software vulnerabilities in open source have basically increased by over 2.5 times. So Geva, why don't you share with us some of the challenges when it comes to thinking about the dev community and SecOps as it relates to visibility?
And thanks for taking that up. And just before we go there, just to say a few words, of course, open source usage has been exploding, as you say, and with it also the amount of vulnerabilities discovered. But the reason open source is interesting from a hacker perspective and why they're spending more time there is a few reasons. One, finding vulnerabilities in open source is easier than finding vulnerabilities in custom code because, I mean, the code is open. But also since vulnerabilities become what's called known, they're categorized and put in some database, actually it's much easier to try to hack through open source vulnerabilities than it is from other vulnerabilities because there are databases of all these vulnerabilities and the barrier to entry becomes much lower for a hacker. But most importantly, hacking is an ROI-based activity like most other stuff. Hackers want to spend their hacking time where the potential for an outcome or reward is bigger. And what makes open source most compelling is that if you find a juicy vulnerability in a very popular open source package, it's precisely that, very popular, which means you can attack potentially thousands, if not tens of thousands of companies versus trying to attack one company, one application, spending a year trying to find, one loophole, and then somebody makes a change in some firewall and your year's worth of hacking goes away. So all this to say, open source is great. It helps teams build applications faster. It helps them reuse, helps the community, helps gain from the community smarts, but also it introduces some risk that needs to be attended. And so as we're looking at this risk, there's some challenges today in organizations in managing it, especially on the differences between where the dev and DevOps teams sit and where the traditional IT security sit. And so as we're looking here, one of these gaps relates to just visibility into the tech stack. The traditional security teams are looking at typically at the infrastructure level, at virtualization level. This is where their tools are, where their comfort level is. But then there's these dev teams which are building modern applications using modern technologies, with open source being one of them. And it's all the way here on the top of the stack. And the security teams typically don't have visibility into that at all, and to how these applications are being built into open source in general. And you take that, so there's not only a stack difference, there's also a visibility gap in terms of where the applications are being built, because developers, of course, are on this left side of the development lifecycle, and the traditional security operations teams are more on the right side, where they tend to look at stuff after it's been deployed and when it's running, versus open source, which is being pulled into the applications by the developer at dev time, all the way left in the development cycle.
And I'd add to that, Trend Micro has over 500,000 customers globally. And this is a theme that we're starting to see security operations teams wake up to. They recognize the risk that open source vulnerabilities introduce into their organization, and they're looking for ways to manage that risk. And kind of the first step to improving that is to getting visibility of what vulnerabilities are actually present in the code that you're delivering. And one of the other areas of gaps when we think about DevOps teams and security operations teams is they tend to have very different tool sets. So your dev teams, they're using things like GitHub, they're using Snyk for looking for vulnerabilities and remediating them. They're using Jenkins and Puppet, Kubernetes, all of these tools that tend to be resident in the DevOps pipeline. If you then go to the right end of the pipeline, the security operations teams is using more tools that are familiar to the security team, things like SIMs, detection and response solutions, and then endpoint security solutions for workloads and containers, and even security solutions for serverless. And by using those two different types of tool sets, there doesn't tend to be a lot of back and forth communication between those two teams. So something that is found in the DevOps team doesn't make its way up to the security operations team, so that processes can continue to be improved and reinforced as things go forward.
And so, as you're looking at this, you have two teams. There are different sides of the development cycle. They're looking at different parts of the application stack. They're using different tools. They have a different language. And the outcome of all of this is two big negatives. One, there's a whole lot of organizational friction where you see developers and security teams not being able to come together and try to, to solve problems together. You can even envision, the random security person running with a security report and trying to find a developer to fix it, and the developer is hiding under the desk, because in that context, the security person is a nuisance. He's adding more work for the developer, and he's adding it in a way that's not meaningful for the developer and not under the same language. And the other side of it is from the security team side, open source risks remains unprioritized or not as prioritized as it should be, not because it's not an important type of risk compared to all the other risks in the organization, just because they don't have enough visibility into it, and it's not easy enough to consider it under the global consideration of where to spend our security dollars on.
And they come from two very different perspectives. The main driver on the dev side of things is they want outcome getting to market as quickly as possible, right? And their perception is that security is just going to come along and slow them down, right? And if you talk to security practitioners, they think it's a little wild out there when it comes to the DevOps world, and they actually aren't interested in managing the risk. When we all know the truth is somewhere in the middle. Everybody has interest in managing the risk of the applications that are delivered so that you've got uptime and no security incidents that you need to manage. And this is why Snyk and Trend are working on a solution to this very problem. We're joining forces to develop a solution that will leverage Snyk's world-class vulnerability scanning tools in your code repository, whether it's a public or a private repository, to look for vulnerabilities in your code. And then it will surface visibility of that to the security operations team via Trend Micro's Cloud One security services platform. So it's bringing the best of these two companies together and their areas of expertise to bring that visibility to the security operations team and hopefully set things up to bridge that gap between security operations and dev. What you see here is Trend Micro Cloud One console. And this is a mock-up that you see of something that will be delivered at the beginning of 2021. So Cloud One is basically a platform that brings together a number of different cloud security tools. It looks at everything from workload security to cloud-based network security, containers and application security, also security posture management. And alongside that, we'll be delivering visibility of vulnerabilities in your code repository with this joint solution that we're working on with Snyk.
And if I can add a few words, why I like the Cloud One platform. So think about it as this collection of different security needs and allowing every customer to pick and choose and build their security tool belt based on the level of maturity of the customers, and allow them over time to add more or to take out stuff based on what their needs. And so not only that is vital today as people are thinking about how to build security for their organization, but now with the ability for us to add this new joint product, new joint solution here, gives one more security angle for security teams to consider as they're building their entire security portfolio.
Excellent.
And so a little bit what's going to be included in this joint solution. So one, and first of all, we're solving for the visibility into the open source that's being built inside the applications. We're giving reports, security reports on it. As you can see here, it will allow you to check over time the trends. Are you adding more vulnerabilities? Are you fixing more vulnerabilities? And also your exposure window, how long it takes you before you fix vulnerabilities. Are you carrying these vulnerabilities for a long time, or are they getting fixed real quickly? We include visibility into the open source license risk, which is associated with open source. Some of the licenses are restrictive. Potentially they're not a good license for a commercial product if this is where you're using open source. All this stuff will be available inside the product, and the repositories behind it are being scanned from the source code itself, so the level of accuracy is going to be very high.
The other thing I would add there is this is going to be a great tool for security operations teams who are trying to show progress against a risk mitigation plan, that they are actually putting controls in place and visibility in place to improve an organization's risk posture. So to be able to show those trends over time about how you are improving the situation is critical, when you're talking to boards or your CISO or management organization.
And one of the most frequent questions we get relating to open source is around the bill of materials. So given an application ABC, what open source is going into it? And this may seem like a trivial question, but it's actually not a real trivial question, because every open source package uses other packages, and those use other packages. So you actually have this very big tree of open source dependencies on every application. But also, interestingly, there's a reverse question where in my application portfolio am I using a particular package, or am I exposed to a particular vulnerability? And so, going back in the day, let's say to the big Equifax breach, where there was a big vulnerability in Struts, which is a popular open source Java package, an important question you can answer today is, where in my portfolio am I using Struts in a vulnerable version that's susceptible to that vulnerability that got attacked. And lastly, the importance of this tool is that it is bringing together both of the personas, the DevOps team, the developers, and the SecOps team under one unified UI, which includes in it both the information that the developers need to do their job, which is a tactical package. This is a package, and that is a version, and this is our recommended remediation and upgrade and steps like that, but also all the widgets and controls for the security operation teams to put in their policies to track the trends over time.
Excellent. So, as I said, this is coming to market as part of Cloud One, and essentially, the benefit of Cloud One is we bring together all of these different types of security tools for different types of security infrastructure into one platform, so that you have common procurement, a common interface. You'll be able to secure all of these security tools along with the new joint Snyk offering via AWS Marketplace or directly from Trend. And the value of this is really around tool consolidation and vendor consolidation, but also the opportunity for integration amongst these different services. We're starting out here with some visibility, providing visibility around vulnerabilities, but there's lots of opportunity to do further integration between the various Cloud One services as well. So, this offering is all about giving security operations visibility of the scale and scope of open source usage and vulnerabilities in their environment, and setting up for that conversation back with the DevOps team. I think I pretty much summarized this slide before we even got here. But the biggest thing is, not only does this solve the technical gap between DevOps and SecOps, but it also really solves that cultural divide and goes a long way towards bringing those two different teams together that traditionally have different tool sets.
And if we allow this to take them both a step forward towards each other, I think we've done our job here.
Exactly. And one thing I want to offer to you in the audience, if this is something that you're interested in, we are getting close to going to our controlled preview of this new offering. And I'd really welcome you to go to this link here and register if you'd like to be one of the customers that gets early access to this offering in the market. So thank you very much, Geva, and thank you to you, the audience. It's been great having the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. This has been great, and hopefully see you all in our beta program.